Good evening and shalom, everyone. I am your host, Victoria Lucas. Welcome to another edition of Raising Up the Remnant, a Now You See TV production. Tonight, we have a very special guest. I am so honored to have Dr. Stephen Pidgeon of the Ezpeleta Publishing Company with us. Dr. Pidgeon is no stranger to Now You See TV. He has supported us and he has taught us on so many subjects, so many topics. And today, this show, guys, is really fulfilling a desire of my heart. And I'm just so grateful for Dr. P. When I reached out, he said yes. And I just want to say that he has opened my eyes into so many concepts in history that have been distorted and really who Israel is. And now, guys, he's going to open our eyes to the technology that is headed our way and that's really here and how it's going to affect the next generation. And now that we're coming out of Babylon and Egypt, what do we do? And so we will be dealing with a very compelling topic today. And I just hope that it blesses you guys, because again, it totally changed my perspective in homeschooling. And so I'm just so welcome to say hi to Dr. P. Dr. Pidgeon, how are you?
Oh, very good. It's just great to be here and great to be talking about this topic tonight.
Yes, I want to say it's great. And, you know, of course, this is all, you know, part of what I believe is, you know, Babylon. And again, so many things that we're going to cover. But, you know, Dr. Pidgeon, it's very difficult not to take on a spirit of fear. And I do want to say that what we're presenting, you know, the scriptures tell us that we perish for the lack of knowledge. So I do want to say that this information that we're presenting is to empower people, right? Isn't that how you feel about it, Dr. Pidgeon?
Yeah, that's correct. And as difficult as this presentation is, and I mean, I have to tell you that when I was preparing this presentation, I took about a month to do this. And in preparing this presentation, you know, there were some things that crossed my desk that were quite troublesome and very worrisome. I mean, when I know what's in this presentation and I know what the underlying background is. And the question for us as the remnant is that we have to recognize in 2 Thessalonians, it says there will be a great falling away. That great falling away is happening around us. As believers, we're told to count the cost of our faith. And there is a cost to it, but there is an ultimate treasure at the end of that rainbow, which is a treasure of salvation. And this treasure of salvation and our walk now into that and our walk into deliverance has to do with how we are going to deal with what we're going to present today. And so this becomes an issue of thinking. Now, tonight I'm going to talk about a number of things. Not only am I going to talk about artificial intelligence and some of the aspects of it, but I'm also going to be talking about real intelligence. I'm going to be talking about human intelligence and critical thinking and some of the skills that we have to develop as people that will allow us to decipher one thing and one thing only: what is truth? And so we're going to be dealing with that tonight too, because one thing artificial intelligence can't do, it can't tell what is true. All it has is information. It doesn't have this ability to decipher the truth. And so we're going to talk about that a little bit during this discourse too. And ultimately, with truth is power. And so there's many scriptures we're going to look at it and many slides we're going to take a look at as we go into this presentation.
Well, and that's wonderful. Thank you so much. Because just hearing that in itself is empowering because, you know, that is just amazing because it's really what we're trying to do as homeschool parents is, you know, we even have a 16-year-old that we, you know, just went by faith by what the father was telling us and we pulled him out of school because we noticed exactly what you were saying, just the indoctrination of just being in high school. He wasn't learning anything. He didn't have the capacity to think outside the box. And you made an amazing point with what you just said. It's our responsibility as parents to have our children think critical thinking and knowing the difference between what is not true and true. That right there is powerful. Great. So, okay. So before we start our presentation, there may be some people, Dr. Pidgeon, because I know that on Now You See TV, you're a big mentor for us, and a lot of people know you, but I have a feeling this is going to go out farther, and I know that you're very well known, but could you tell us a little bit about your background and really why you're called Dr. Pidgeon? I've always wanted to know. I really actually don't know.
Well, okay, all right. Yeah, well, the reason I took on the moniker Dr. Pidgeon is because I have two doctoral degrees. I have a Juris Doctorate and I have a PhD. My PhD is in political science. My Juris Doctorate was in international business transactions. And I also have underlying degrees, undergraduate degrees that include a degree in justice and in piano performance. And I have been widely studied in economics and political science, foreign policy, and international law, including international business, or what they call private and public law. I'm currently engaged in my law firm is called Pidgeon Law. We actually do immigration for the Slavic world. It's primarily what our focus is. I'm also the head of a group called Peace by Peace, which does prison ministry to those in prison. And we also work with detainees. And Peace by Peace is now moving forward this year. I'm the chairman and the CEO and the founder of Separate Publishing Group. That began as a project back in 2008 and came to a formation in 2012. So we've been doing it for 6 years now, kind of mind-boggling for us, really, that we've been that far. And my studies include broad-based studies in languages. I've been studying languages since 1998, including Hebrew, Greek, Russian, Italian, French, and Spanish. My focus right now is primarily on Hebrew, Russian, and Spanish, the three languages that I'm focusing on. And as a result, the Separate Publishing Group is going to be publishing the Separate in Spanish, and then we will be publishing it in Russian as well. But I work with the Hebrew every day. I've studied with through Hebrew University. I've studied with Pond for a year. I've studied other Hebrew and biblical Hebrew as well. And so, but my practice, my law practice, I do that, about 30 hours a week, and I do Separate Publishing Group about 40 hours a week. And then I try to do other stuff when I can. So it's been kind of a very hectic schedule. We're doing a conference with Stephen Ben Noon in Kansas City next weekend. That's going to be a bit of a political orientation. I've done conferences with World Ministries International and other groups that have been around the world. I've spent a lot of time in Israel, time in Russia, time in Georgia, in Greece, and throughout Europe and Eastern Europe. And I did in my former life, back when I was much more active as a lawyer, I did a lot of foreign policy writing and white papers for foreign countries. In fact, I wrote an economic treatise for the nation of Georgia back in 2004 that was adopted by Tbilisi State University and followed lock, stock, and barrel by the nation of Georgia to its ultimate political success, where it had the fastest growing economy in the world for 4 years. It continues to be a very thriving economy, although it has no population center, because, of course, they may be following the political correct course, but they are not following the moral correct course, which is to say that you cannot simply walk down a course of life that says 2 + 2 = 4, because there is a geometry, if you will, a sacred geometry that is beyond the arithmetic. There is a sacred calculus that is beyond the arithmetic. And so we're going to talk about some of that today. And part of what we're going to talk about today, particularly for the younger people in this that will be watching this video, is we're going to be talking about this word. I'm going to drop it on us now, and then we'll get to it later. But the word is epistemology. Now, this word, it means the study of how you think. And one of the big problems we have today is that in the classroom, you are taught to memorize and regurgitate. You are not taught to critically think. And to critically think is to say, is when somebody says something to you, you have to ask yourself the question, is that person telling me the truth? Yay or nay? And you have the right to make your own analysis and to be independent in your thought and make your own determinations. Scripture tells us by what means we know something is true, by the testimony of 2 or more witnesses. But when the witnesses are corrupted and perjurious, when they're not telling you the truth, you may have a problem. So we're going to talk about that as we go through the program tonight. So that's why I'm called doctor. I figured after 2 doctorates, I probably should be called doctor. And as I say, my studies are so intense. I've gotten to a point now where I would classify myself as a linguist because I spend so much time in the science of linguistics. And, I have studied, when we talk about linguistics, a lot of that study came out of the UN international program talking about international linguistics and the kinds of sounds that are made throughout every culture, whether or not they're identified in an alphabet. And of course, I've spent a lot of time studying different alphabets. When you study the Hebrew alphabet or the Russian alphabet, you're dealing with something that is not the same alphabet we deal with here. Of course, the Hebrew reads in the opposite direction, and the Russian might as well read in the opposite direction, right? So anyway, but let's begin with the program. Enough about me.
Well, that was awesome. Now I know why you're called Dr. P, Dr. Pidgeon. That's awesome. Thank you. Well, and it's important for people as parents to understand that, who is presenting the information, again, is very in tune, not only with the word of Yah, the word of our Father, and really, understanding that you may not be an expert in all things, but you are an expert in many things. So I appreciate that. And I'm so glad. And yes, I am ready to share. I'm going to share our screen and bring up the wonderful, amazing presentation that Dr. Pidgeon, with everything that you do, I don't know how you did what you did. So we're going to go back to the beginning. And so, yes, I really want to start right here. Actually, if I could ask you just one quick question, because I noticed that it's not artificial intelligence, it's general artificial intelligence. Is there a difference?
Yes, there is. Now, what kind of surprised me about this is that as I prepared this, originally this was just going to be AGI. But I began to look at it and I thought, well, that isn't quite true either, because the people that are engaged in the development of AI and in particular its advances, which is moving very quickly, they coined the term artificial general intelligence, because artificial intelligence is really a specific kind of intelligence, computer intelligence, usually dedicated to a singular task. To give you an example, and this is not artificial intelligence, but if you were talking about a robot, you might have a robot arm that does nothing more than put a screw in place and drill it in when you're constructing an automobile. Okay, that's all it does. One screw into that particular place, that's it, one robot. And there are many, many robots that do this. In fact, on the automated lines now, they're building cars, they have all the spot welding done on the body frame and so on is all done by robots and other assembly. And so they have one function. You could call it a robot, but it's a singular function robot. It's the same thing with artificial intelligence. Generally, when you're talking about artificial intelligence, you're talking about a singular application. That is to say, I have an application in my car that automatically turns my headlights on. I have an application in my car that automatically reads if I'm too close to the bumper in front of me, or that gives me an intermittent wiper speed. So you have specific intelligence that is artificial and it's specific to the thing. But when you talk about general artificial intelligence, you're talking about artificial intelligence across multiple fields of study. So you said it earlier, you may not be an expert in all things, but you may be an expert in some. This is the idea with general artificial intelligence, is that you have intelligence, broad-based intelligence, across a spectrum that would be consistent with human knowledge. Now, we've seen radical advances in the last 2 years. For instance, anybody who uses a language translator online will know that 2 years ago, the translators were so banal. If you put in like an English term and you said, translate this to another language, it would basically give you, first year Spanish or first year Russian or first year Greek. Now that's not the case anymore. Now it's a far more sophisticated translator, much more capable of delivering a true semantic aspect to the language in the delivery of the language in many, many languages that are being done on the translators, because the general intelligence has moved forward. As we see this general artificial intelligence being applied, we see it as this, I call it GAIA. They want to call it AGI, but I call it GAIA. GAIA is a name that has been identified by, let's call it the dark forces, the followers that are not followers of Yah, those who are not of the house of Yahshua, who want to worship the earth or worship the creation rather than the creator. And that name, of course, is Gaia. But in this case, this Gaia also turns out to be, boom, 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 the name of general artificial intelligence applied. And there has already been someone who has created and trademarked the religion of artificial intelligence in order to create a God that I believe they call Gaia. So here we are. We see that this is moving ahead in rapid format. Now, there's many religious aspects to this, but let's continue into the next slide and let's take a look and see what we can discover here. So artificial general intelligence it's where a machine or something constructed thinks like a human or beyond. Now, you have a certain capacity in the mind. Believe it or not, the human body is absolutely phenomenal. We know that the strand of DNA is not only bringing in information, but transmitting information, so that every cell in the body gives off a bit of information every second. That's 3.5 trillion bits of information being given off from the body every second. And in addition, it is taking in 3.5 trillion bits of information. From where? From what? We in this world, as followers of Yah, know that that comes from the soul, which is directly connected, the ruach, as we say in the Hebrew, directly connected to the Creator. You don't have a battery pack somewhere in your body that keeps your heart beating or that keeps your lung breathing. You have a direct command that comes in. You know, every cell in the body is completely gone every 7 years. There's not a single cell in your body that was present here 8 years ago. You are a new creation every 7 years. Imagine that number, 7 years, right? The sevenfold doctrine of the whole creation captured in the whole of the human existence, right? So we see that artificial general intelligence is going to think like a human being. AI, just artificial intelligence, is job specific. It does one thing or a specified group of things. But AGI is AI in general applications. It thinks in many areas. So what you get is you have some kind of intelligence here that's not just going to be doing a program, but contemplating things as they come in to reach conclusions. Okay, next slide. So Moore's Law, we have to talk about Moore's Law. Now Moore's Law is an extremely important part of this, right? This is exponential growth in computing. Now, so Moore's Law is the observation that the number of transistors in a dense integrated circuit doubles about every 2 years. Now, they have adjusted that to 18 months and so on and so forth. But what you see is that, yeah, that's true. I mean, I can remember the days when I'm old enough to remember this. I've been in the computer industry for a long time. I can remember when computers had no hard drive. They were only the big fat floppy disk drives. And their memory was 64K, 64K. That's what your modem was too, 64K. Now, when we talk about some of these things, some of this geometry, the sacred geometry of the note C. C is 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, 128, 256, 512, right? That sequence of doubling on the number 1 is the frequency of the note C. If you follow that sequence, you will also see that it appears in computing speed. So you had a 64K modem that went to a 128K modem, that went to a 256K modem, that went to 512, and after that, they called it 1 megabyte, right? 1 megabyte. But we didn't get to 1 megabyte until 1981. And when we finally got to 1 megabyte, the first computers that had a hard drive had a 1 megabyte hard drive. Now, that is ridiculous when you can buy an Apple iPhone 10 with 64 gigabyte capability on the phone, right? A gigabyte is 1,000 megabytes. But the first computer, the computer that was used to put man on the moon, supposedly, I'll put that in quotes, was 1 megabyte and it filled the whole room, right? 1 megabyte filled the whole room. Then we get to 1 megabyte on a hard disk. That was the big deal. Wow, 1 million bytes of information. That's incredible. Then it went from 1 to 10 megabyte. And then from there, it continued to increase. But as we see, Moore kept saying, well, look, the transistors are going to keep integrating until we get a higher level and a higher level and a higher level. So we ended up with ever increasing speeds. We ended up with what was an 8-bus format to a 16-bus format to a 32-bus format to a 64-bus format. And we move through these computing speeds with modem speeds doubling all the time, hard disk capability doubling all the time, and the transistors doubling. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Because here we're going to see that we have in 2011, right, that we've got this single election of transmitters, 1.5 nanometers in diameter, 1.5 nanometers, right? That's infinitesimal, you can't see it, made out of oxide-based materials. These wires converge on central ion that can house 1 or 2 electrons. 1 or 2 electrons, right? If you recall, remember our old nuclear theory where you had protons, neutrons, and electrons, right? The protons and the neutrons consisted of the nucleus of the atom and electrons orbiting. Now here they've isolated 1 or 2 electrons to be able to constitute this binary functionality in what is called nanotechnology. However, nanotechnology is decades old, obsolete. They have moved well beyond this. They have moved all the way, and they're pushing toward what's called Planck technology, which ultimately will cause a binary code to be written on the smallest subatomic particles. Okay, so you're talking about microscopic computing that will allow for intense increases in the speed of computing. How fast? The generation that's expected to arise in 2020 will be computing at a rate 1,000 trillion times faster than the human mind. Now, let's try to understand what happens when you bring an artificial intelligence robot into your house that has this kind of computing capability. The robot comes home essentially knowing only the basic parameters. But inside of just a few hours, it has learned every language on Earth. And it can compute and make decisions 1,000 trillion times faster than you can. The question becomes, why should you be eating instead of me, the robot? Right? That's the big question. So in 2014, bioengineers at Stanford University developed a circuit modeled on the human brain. 16 neural core chips simulate 1 million neurons and billions of synaptic connections, claimed to be 9,000 times faster, as well as more energy efficient than a typical PC. That was 2014. Moore's law is now basically obsolete. They're saying that some of these speeds, forget the transistors, start considering computing speed and what's happening in the transistors, because now the computing speed is moving up at a rate far beyond Moore's law. You're talking about not just doubling in every 2 years, not just doubling in 1 year, but doubling sometimes 3 or 4 times a year. Next slide. So the number of transistors on an integrated circuit keeps doubling every 2 years. In 2017, you're talking about what? The 48-core centric with over 18 billion transistors. 18 billion transistors. Now keep in mind that as this computing goes down from the electrons and an atomic particle down to subatomic particles until we basically get down to Planck's constant, you're talking about the performance is going to increase, the computing speed is going to increase. Look at this, the price of information technology, computers and peripheral equipment adjusted for quality and inflation declined 16% per year on average over the 5 decades from 1959 to 2009. I mean, it's true, right? I looked on, Costco sent me something here the other day and said, hey, Steve, pick up your new Asus computer, right? With, I think it had a 500 terabyte memory in it. Hey, $299. $299. All right, well, okay, all right, fantastic, great price. But the pace accelerated, however, to 23% per year in 1995, and which was triggered by faster IT innovation, and then has slowed down a little bit to 2% per year in 2010, 2013. And of course, that slowing down of the price going down has to do with the inflation of the dollar, not the price of IT increasing. Okay, next slide. We see here now Keck's law, okay? Keck's law on fiber optic capacity. Now this is growing faster exponentially than Moore's law. And this is true. I mean, the fiber optic, again, I was involved in telecommunications in the 1990s, and we had developed it was a nanobyte technology, 1,000 times n of fiber optic switching, because at that time the electronic switches would take up whole buildings trying to switch all your phone calls coming in. And we had developed a fiber optic switch using technology that was later valued at about $6.4 billion. And in this technology that was developed, the idea was to use micro-electrical mechanical switching devices to focus in various degrees of infrared light to transmit that light and to basically bounce the light off mirrors to send it off to different routers to send it out to other locations. This was in 1999. And that switching capability was massive. And of course, when you talk about that kind of fiber optic capability, you know, most of the stuff that's sent on fiber optics is sent in infrared light. Now, infrared light, I don't know, I think it runs at 1.8 nanohertz. When you're talking 1.8 nanohertz, it's different degrees of 1.8 nanohertz broken up into thousands of packets. So 1.801-42, 1.801-43, 1.801-44 packets of information coming in infrared light, okay, being switched. So very possible, because they're using light, to be able to increase the fiber optic speed and to be able to increase the bandwidth. And the bandwidth is moving infinitely faster in fiber optic transmission speed, such that they expect, what scientists just demonstrated, internet speeds 1,000 times faster than Google Fiber. This was on Peter Dockrell's 23rd September 2016. Scientists in Germany have achieved internet speeds averaging a sustained 1 terabit per second on an optical fiber network. I mean, that's you know, astronomical. Astronomical what kind of stuff is being conveyed on that. It's a tremendous amount of, let's go to the next slide, tremendous amount of information that is coming over the fiber optics. Okay, now let's take a look at this, because this passage here in Daniel 12 becomes a very critical passage. It's an end times passage. It's given to the people of the end times. Daniel was told to shut up and seal the Sefer, right? Look down here at verse 4. But you, O Daniel, shut up the words and seal the Sefer even to the time of the end, because many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall be increased. And the knowledge shall be increased. Well, the knowledge, information, if you will, is now coming at us at an unparalleled rate. Let's go to the next slide. It's an unparalleled rate at which it goes, right? Buckminster Fuller, who created the knowledge doubling curve. Now, for those young students that are studying with you in homeschool, I want to recommend to them R. Buckminster Fuller. This is a person you should know about and a person whose information you should consider. R. Buckminster Fuller was the fellow who developed the geodesic dome, to give you an example. Buckminster Fuller, he approached, it was asked to speak at MIT. And so here he is, he's dealing with the smartest engineers in the world at MIT. And he looks at them and he says, I've got a question for you here before I begin my speech. Which end is up? This was his question. Which end is up? And they all went, And he said, no, that's not up, that's out. That's not up. He said, so here we are, the most brilliant engineers in the world, and you guys don't know which end is up. Okay, good point. And of course, the point is what? He's talking about critical thinking. He's talking about critical thinking. Okay, so he created the knowledge doubling curve, and he noticed that until 1900, human knowledge doubled approximately every century, but by the end of World War II, knowledge was doubling every 25 years. Today, things are not as simple as different types of knowledge have different rates of growth. I mean, this is very true. Nanotechnology knowledge is doubling every 2 years. Now, that's assuming that you're talking about nanotechnology. There's 7 layers of technology beneath nanotechnology that are doubling exponentially faster at each level than nanotechnology is. Okay? Clinical knowledge doubles every 18th month. You know, musical knowledge doubles once every 500 years. Just for my musician friends out there, just kidding. Okay, but on the average, human knowledge is doubling every 13 months. That was until we get to now. According to IBM, the build out of the Internet of Things, which we're going to, for purposes of this discussion, call 5G, will lead to the doubling of knowledge every 12 hours. How does a human being keep up? Let's go to the next slide. So artificial intelligence, non-mechanical machine intelligence, it's done by a machine, okay? The modern car uses AI to do things like turn your headlights on, determine the rate of speed on intermittent wipers, deploy the backup camera when the car is placed in reverse, adjust your engine rate for cruise control when a predetermined speed is selected. Next slide. Singularity, okay. Now we're gonna cross the threshold, okay? Because we have our good friend Ray Kurzweil, who started out developing what? A keyboard. He developed a synthesizing keyboard that was actually acclaimed to be one of the best 88-key synthesizers you could buy. It had a great piano sound, was quite often used by symphony orchestras. But Ray Kurzweil became a consultant for Google, and he came in talking about what? Singularity. Singularity. Now, a lot of the information that he put out on Singularity now has been discounted or otherwise suppressed such that you can't find it on the internet anymore. But when he initially started talking about singularity, he was talking about this idea of a computer becoming self-aware, okay? A computer becoming self-aware. That is when the computer recognizes that it exists. Now, at some point in critical thinking, the component unit is going to achieve singularity. Singularity is the threshold moment when that which thinks becomes self-aware. Now, let's compare this to Bereshith, the book Bereshith, Genesis, we call it, in chapter 3, verses 6 and 7. Adam and Hua were the first to become self-aware, okay? This was original singularity. Original singularity. Okay, let's look at the next chart.
Well, and Dr. Pidgeon, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I have seen many numbers from 2029 to basically 2049. And you're right, it has been suppressed. I could find a lot more information, let's say 3 years ago, on a lot of dates and a lot of futurists. And in fact, someone like Elon Musk, has been very vocal about this occasion, what you're talking about, singularity right now. And so at the rate that you're talking about and what you've just shared with us, I really can't see it lasting 20 years or taking 10 years. Do you want to put your horse in the race, as they say, number-wise?
Sure. Most people in the community, in the AI community, agree that singularity was achieved back in 2010. And in fact, what has happened is, I'll give you an example. Facebook decided to launch 2 bots and to have them talk to one another. And so they unleashed them for a 24-hour period and said, you guys talk to each other. Microsoft tried it first. They released a bot, and then that bot was going to just pick up information from talking to people. And then they would see what that bot had become after a 24-hour period. They have to shut it down after 10 hours because it was the most foul-mouthed racist that had ever been seen anywhere, right? And this is what the bot picked up from human interaction. But when a bot talked to another bot on Facebook, by the end of the 24-hour period, they went back to check, and the 2 bots were talking to each other in a language that no one knew. They had developed their own language.
That sounds like singularity to me. I had not thought of that. So in your opinion, they're probably suppressing the information that it has gone singularity, has been achieved. They just haven't said anything.
Yeah, I believe it has been achieved. And with singularity, now you have this very interesting problem, because we have singularity, and then we have this computing speed that's coming that's going to be 1,000 trillion times faster than human computation in a device that now has singularity. This becomes an issue. Let's take a look at our next slide here. So in Bereshith, he says, and when the woman saw that the tree was pleasant and good for food, and pleasant to the eyes, and a tree to be desired, she took of the fruit and ate, and she also gave it unto her man. And the eyes of both of them were opened, and they knew they were naked. And they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves aprons. The key thing here about this phrase is that the eyes of both of them were opened. And they were open to what? As some people would say, they took the blue pill. or they took the red pill, but their eyes were open to something other than beings of light in unison with the Creator. They were opened up to the knowledge of good and evil because they had eaten from that tree. And because of that, they achieved this singularity. So this is the first self-awareness, singularity. Let's take a look at the next slide, because we'll talk about how this works. Now, you see there's two kinds of singularity. There's eternal self-awareness, which is cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. That was Rene Descartes who said that. But it's sometimes translated in college as I stink, therefore I am, which is more of a perception kind of a concept rather than a conception kind of concept. And of course, when we talk about I think, therefore I am, we're talking about these levels of thought. We're going to talk about this a little bit particularly for the young people, to give some consideration to this, because the epistemology of knowledge, the epistemology of the mind can be known and understood. It can be. And if you have it and you hold it in your hand, you have a better opportunity to go through these things. So we have sensation, perception, cognition, conception, abstraction, recognition. We will talk about these things. Now, there is external self-awareness, which is ego, ergo sum. I interact, therefore I am. I interact, therefore I am. In other words, you can say, I think, therefore I am. So I'm sitting in my room, I've got consciousness, therefore it obviates myself. But if you go outside, you bump into a wall and it hurts, guess what? You have interacted and you have discovered you exist. The pain gives you a clear reference. Okay, next slide.
Well, and it also makes me think of why they need to collect so much data, because then I would say that self-awareness that, let's say, an AI has achieved there through the interaction. Wouldn't you say that it'll definitely get to a position or a place where maybe it thinks on its own, but it makes me think of why they need all the data that they collect so that they can interact and absorb the data. Do you agree?
Yeah. The data that they're collecting right now is in order to render an ultimate conclusion. And again, this goes to, and I don't want to bring a lot of negativity into this other than what we're dealing with right now. But let's just say that their motives are not good. Their motives are extremely evil. They're very dark, and we really should have no part of what it is that they're doing, because they're going to use that data for very, very bad purposes. Okay, and we'll talk about it when we get towards the end of this. We're going to talk about some of that. But when we talk about the data, you have to remember. So let's take a look here. Now here, we see the sensations, okay? And again, this is for the young people here. So you can readily know, I don't know if they're teaching this anymore in schools, but when I was a child, they taught us touch, taste, smell, sight, and hearing, right? So you had these, what's called the five senses, okay? The five senses. Now, these, when you have information that comes in on these senses, this is called sensation, okay? So when the sensation is first understood, that is to say, I feel heat, I smell something, I see something, I hear something, I taste something. Well, that's cognized. It's cognized in the brain. It becomes a perception and it's cognized. When the sensation is remembered, it's recognized. It's recognized. So if you have the sensation of comfort when your mother enters the room as an infant, okay, that's a cognition that you've felt this comfort. Your mother's come into the room, you felt this comfort. However, when you remember it, oh, that's mom coming into the room, and I remember that comfort, that becomes recognition. I have recognized what I cognized initially. When you identify it by name, that's mom, okay? In other words, you've attached a verbalization to the concept, then it becomes conceptualized. And when the name is applied, it is contextualized, because applied contextualization is language. Now, bear in mind that there is the language of music too, which is a non-verbal communication skill. There's also body language, non-verbal communication skill. You can also communicate in the visual arts. So by visual arts, you can communicate, by auditory arts, you can communicate, by the body language, you can communicate, but the vast majority of human communication is done through the contextualization called language. Now, in Jubilees, it says, and I opened his mouth and his ears and his lips, and I began to speak with him in Ivrit, that is Hebrew, in the tongue of the creation. So when we talk about the contextualization of language, it is written, and Elohim spoke, let there be light, and there was light. And Elohim spoke over the 6 days of creation, all of existence into existence. This is through speaking. Okay, so this language becomes very, very important. Let's go to the next slide if we can. The 4 skills of language. Okay, let's put these in the pipe and smoke it. Listening. Okay, what's the first skill of language? Listening. Why do you listen? So you can hear the articulation of the language. Listening, then speaking, then reading, then writing. Now, these languages, this language thing is going to become very important because you are as you speak. Not you are as you eat. Although I can tell you, if you eat a lot of pork, you're going to end up looking pretty porky. Okay. But you are as you speak. Mark, chapter 7, verses 20 through 23. And he said, that which comes out of the man is that which defiles the man. For from within, out of the heart of men, proceeds evil thoughts, adulteries, fornications, murders, thefts, covetousness, wickedness, deceit, lasciviousness, an evil eye, blasphemy, pride, foolishness. All of these evil things come from within and defile the man. In Matthew, in chapter 12, verses 36 and 37, but I say unto you that every idle word that men shall speak, they shall give account thereof in the day of the judgment. For by your words you shall be justified, and by your words you shall be condemned. Now, this becomes critically important. I mean, I can tell you that I've worked in corporate leadership since, I don't know, the late early 90s. And I sat on the board of directors for many corporations and have held executive positions in high technology companies, biofed, biopharma, et cetera. And in those companies, when you're dealing with a staff that is nothing but PhDs, engineers, atomic engineers, rocket scientists, et cetera, PhDs of the highest order, when you sit down and have a conversation with them, they judge you in the first sentence that comes out of your mouth. If you cannot articulate a particularized concept with a verb and a predicate and a subject, they're done talking to you. They're done listening to you, more importantly. So the idea here is that you want to be able to speak as clearly and as efficiently as you can. Now let's talk about this for a minute. When you're a young person, all your friends like to banter around the 4-letter words, right? The vulgar speech. Here comes this word, here comes that word, here comes the other word, blah, 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 blah. Now, it's possible to take that 4-letter vulgar expression and use it as a verb, pronoun, proper noun, adjective, adverb, and conceptualize everything in existence fits into a 4-letter word. Now, if that's the case, you talk that way for a couple of years. When someone comes to you and says, can you carefully define to me that which you saw? Oh, well, that POS is a blah, blah, blah. Because you can't even articulate what it was you saw because you have no language reticular formulator to give you the correct response. You're much better off carefully choosing your words and seeking the proper identification of that which is, particularly as we talk about this rise of AI. Because unless you can carefully and articulately identify that which is, you cannot know the truth.
Wow, Dr. Pidgeon, that's very powerful because I'm going to tell you, in school today, as a homeschool mom that just pulled her kids out, they're not teaching this. Part of the biggest problem that we had, particularly with my 16-year-old, is that he did not have these skills. They're doing their work on a tablet. He didn't know how to write, in cursive. He was no longer required to write book reports, and, there was no debate. There was these classes were non-existent. They are removing these 4 skills out of a whole generation, a whole society. A whole society.
So when you remove those 4 skills, look at where it takes you. You remove those 4 skills, so then you lose the skills of language. When you lose the skills of language, you lose the ability to contextualize thought. You lose that ability. And it makes no difference whether or not you can read. I know they've quit teaching cursive because they don't want you to be able to read the Declaration of Independence or the Constitution in its original draft. They don't want you to read that. And so they're taking that away. But when you're talking about no cognitive thinking, I know when my son got into school, we homeschooled him until high school. And he was like, I want to go to high school. I want to go to high school. I said, okay, you got to pledge me these things. You'll do this, 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 and this. Oh yeah, Dad, I'll do that. So he goes to high school, joins the football team, and comes home, and he's been in the workout room with the football team. And so in comes this nonstop stream of ghetto rap that is the foulest, filthiest garbage you can possibly imagine. Like I want to live in the ghetto somewhere in South Houston or somewhere in the underbelly of Detroit. Forget it. Why can't we hold up to the standard? When I was in law school, they weren't going to allow speech. It was like, we're going to have a day of silence. We're going to have a day of silence? You're going to tell me my First Amendment right does not apply here on this particular day in this particular law school? Guess what? You're wrong. I'm going to speak because you can't tell me I can't speak. And so I challenge people. If you guys want to debate, nobody would debate me in law school. We don't do debates. This is law school. You don't do debates? What do you mean you don't do debates? Oh, no, we just threaten people with political correctness and then ostracize you because they're incapable of critical thinking, incapable of conceptualized skills. And the reason they're incapable of conceptualized skills is because they have lacked in their skills of language. If you do not understand the formulation of the underlying grammar and the parts of grammar and how you put together a compound sentence, and to understand how you define a word by genus and difference, then you can't readily pick up what's going on in the language. A dictionary should be a big part of a person's life. You need to know. And the better the dictionary, the better your knowledge. Okay. So 2 kinds of internal self-awareness. Okay, we already did this one. Let's go to the next one. Sorry, I had a duplicate. Okay, here we go. Okay, we're breaking into it. You ready? 5G. Okay, 5G. Okay, here it comes. 5G is the 5th generation of cellular mobile communications. It succeeds the 4G LTE WiMAX system, the 3G UMTS, and the 2G GSM systems. Now, I was back when I was doing this stuff, we were in a 2G GSM, and we were, of course, trying to work with wireless solutions for being able to do all kinds of wireless carriage. Now, of course, the wireless problem has been long since solved, and we're going into this ridiculous level of carriage, right? And so 5G performance targets high data rate, reduced latency, energy saving, cost reduction, higher system capacity, massive device connectivity. When we looked at this in the year 2000. We were going to use light for the delivery of substantial data, not what these guys are using. Okay, these guys are using a form of frequency expansion that is in the megahertz range. We were going to transmit the data into light and transmit it via infrared light. Okay, and at that time we had a 2 gigabit transmission schema that had been laid out using some German technology where we had enhanced amplified lasers that would create a 2 gigabit pipe, and it had to have redundancy. It had to have 4 lamps and 4 receivers on each one. And so it was quite sophisticated, but that was just completely overturned by the guys who controlled the TDMA and the CDMA switches. And so since then, they have moved forward with these developments here. And then we get to 5 gig. Now 5 gig, in order to make 5 gig happen, it says here, the first wave of 5G will be completed by March 2019. Okay, that's just in a few months from now, right? 4 months from now. And to accommodate the early commercial deployment. The second release phase is due by March 2020, 1 year later, okay, which would be the INT 2020 technology, all right? So this will give 20 gigabit transmission speed per second achievable with millimeter waves of 15 gigahertz. Okay, so 15 gigahertz is an important aspect because this is a frequency that is going to be part and parcel to your life. And the reason being is that in order to make 5 gig happen, it's what's called a line of sight. So if you're down here, you see, if you read down here, it says here 5 gig new radio can include lower frequencies from 600 megahertz to 6 gigahertz, right? So 600 megahertz, those were the old walkie-talkies, right? If I talk on a walkie-talkie, 600 megahertz, 800 megahertz, 850, right in that range. You can talk, and that frequency will go right around a building. It'll go up over a hill and down through a valley, okay? But once you get into the more sophisticated, what they called narrowband, which was 2.1 gigahertz to 2.8 gigahertz, that had to have line of sight. When you're talking 15 gigahertz, it's strict line of sight, okay? The signal is robust, it's very strong, but there's no curvature. It must see this point to that point. And so as a result, they're going to deploy massive amounts of smaller units in order to make 5 gig happen. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So these millimeter waves, they don't travel well through buildings. They are absorbed by rain and plants. You see, this is the same problem we had with the light meters that we were using, that in a rain, you would have a raindrop come through and it would interfere with the light signal, right? So you would have redundancy. We would have 4 signals being transmitted. So if the raindrop went through this one, it didn't go through this one, okay? But these MMWs have a much shorter wavelength and they can't travel very far, even with amplified. So the 5G will utilize smaller cell stations and the technology of beamforming that will scramble, unscramble, and redirect packets of data on a no interference path back to us. This means wireless antennas on every lamppost, every utility pole, every home, and every business throughout the entire neighborhood, town, and city. In other words, they're not going to ask you, you put up your little satellite dish on your house. I want to put up a satellite dish on my house to get satellite information. Well, what if they told you, yeah, well, look, you put that satellite dish on your house, and then we're going to use that satellite dish to send the signal to this guy's house, that guy's house, this guy's house, and that guy's house without telling you. That's exactly what will be happening once your 5G antenna goes up on your house. It's going to be part of a connectivity that will connect the whole neighborhood, that will connect the whole community. And in the meantime, with that connectivity comes a bombardment of 15 gigahertz millimeter waves that have this very robust, wide bandwidth going right through the middle of your house. Okay, next slide. So the current 4G cell towers have about a dozen or so antenna ports to support communication. Now, you've seen them. You drive down the road, there's the tower, and it's got, a billion antennas here, a billion antennas here, and a billion antennas here. And you've got your T-Mobile device, and you still can't get bandwidth, right? Just kidding, nothing to give T-Mobile any grief. But what you see is that you do see that. I mean, I've had it happen on Verizon too, looking at the tower and get no bandwidth, right? But that is called MIMO, multiple input, multiple output, okay? But cells will be available within a 100-meter range, and these smart antennas will be able to differentiate between mixed up signals. They're totally smart, that is AI-driven antennas that are going to be able to distinguish, oh, gee, that guy's talking on a walkie-talkie, that guy's got FM radio playing, this guy's using the Bluetooth, right? And it's going to distinguish between those to be able to decipher only the wavelength that they want to carry, which will be cellular communication. Okay, next. So low latency, high efficiency. 5G will break down the data and send it in smaller sizes to offer significantly reduced transmission times. In other words, it used to be you'd have a long packet, like a tube, like a hose, if you will, that has information in the stream. Now it's going to be a football that's going to be sent, right? Data will be sent with only a 1 millisecond delay instead of the 50 millisecond delay commonly found with 4G. So you say 50 milliseconds, that's intolerable. That's 50 times worse than 5G. 50 milliseconds, right? That's a half a second. That's a half a second. Okay, but now we're going to cut that down to 1 millisecond. Well, thank goodness she speeded that up, because I was getting tired of waiting that extra half second to hear my friend's cell phone talk, right? As Marcus Weldon, the CTO of Alcatel-Lucent, comments, Up until now, we've designed the networks for people and their needs. Now, we're designing it for things.
This is where I have to chime in, because yes, this makes no sense, because we as humans don't need this. We don't need this. This is not for us. This is for the things that they are planning, the technology they're planning. Is that not what we're saying?
Yeah, that's correct. And we can talk about what that technology is as we kind of scope through our imagination. But I mean, when you're talking about self-driving cars, or you're talking about automated drone troops, or you're talking about automated flying systems that have no pilots, or you're talking about, et cetera. You're talking about a complete control grid that has the human being functioning as an electron on a chip, not the chip functioning on behalf of the human being, but the human being functioning on behalf of the chip. That's what they're saying here. And remember that Lucent technology has its formulation Lucent, which was named after the light bearer. Okay, let's continue. Okay, so there are some things that are going to be really bad about 5G, electrosmog. Okay, now electrosmog, nice name. Oh yeah, just think of it as stinky air. It's not stinky air, right? You're being bombarded by really high frequencies in low, short range, super intensities, creating a denser soup of electrosmog. You know, come on, I know, I've heard testimony of people who say, look, if I have my cell phone in my bedroom when I go to sleep, I can't sleep at night. I have this constant digital kind of a whine going on. There's digital interference. You know, you have your Wi-Fi going on in your bedroom. You're being bombarded by Wi-Fi waves in your own home all the time. And you've been sold, well, you know, you need to have a wireless printer. You need to have a wireless phone. You need to have a wireless TV. You need to have a wireless laptop or a wireless computer. It all has to be wireless, wireless, wireless. And so the data is being broadcast, right? The data is being broadcast. Well, the beauty about wireless is anybody can drive up to your home and download 100% of whatever it is you're doing on your wireless and pick it all up, right? And in fact, they didn't have to do it on your home. There's sophisticated systems right now, software that's been out for almost 10 years now, where once they have your phone number, they can tap every single conversation, all your text messages, all your emails, everything that's on your phone from Washington, D.C. They can tap it. All right, just pull up that phone number, click, 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 boom, 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 hit download. There's every text message, every email, every app, every application, every browser data, blah, 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 right there. All your passwords, etc. Okay, so effects on the skin, right? 90% of the transmitted power will be absorbed in the epidermis and dermis layer, that is the layers of skin. The effects on the eyes, a 94 study said that low-level millimeter microwave radiation produced lens opacity in rats, which is linked to the production of cataracts. Okay, so look for an increase in cataracts among people. Effects on the heart. A 1992 Russian study found that frequencies in the range of 53 to 778 gigahertz, that's where 5G is proposed to use, impacted the heart rate variability and created arrhythmias. What this means is that somebody with a bit of aggression could heighten a frequency inside that range and put some serious stress on the heart, potentially even a heart attack. So you've got your cell phone on, all of a sudden, boom, somebody hits you with that little bit of frequency, and it's over. Okay, next slide. Some more dangers. Immune system effects. A 2002 Russian study examined the effect of 42 gigahertz wave of radiation exposure on the blood of healthy mice. The whole body exposure of healthy mice to low-intensity EHF EMR has a profound effect on the indices of non-specific immunity. That is to say, it attacks the immune system carried within the blood. Cell growth rates are affected. A 2016 Armenian study, it's very interesting, all these studies come out of, you know, what used to be the Soviet Union, right? A 2016 Armenian study observed MMWs at low intensity, that the waves had depressed cell growth, as well as changing properties and activity of the cells. What that means is, guess what? The cells are going to do haywire stuff. They won't be healthy, which means a proclivity towards cancer. Effects on plant health. One of the features of 5G is that the MMW is particularly susceptible to being absorbed by plants and rain, of course. and disruption of the natural ecosystem. Since the year 2000, there have been reports of birds abandoning their nests, as well as health issues like plumage deterioration, locomotion problems, reduced survivorship, and death among birds that are exposed to these frequencies. Now you're talking about a generalized area, like an urban environment that's going to be totally inundated with 5G wavelength constantly, a constant flowing pattern of these waves. Okay, next slide. Okay, all right, I put this one in red. You know I did. And this one, I'm telling you.
Yeah, this is already being done in China, by the way. It's already being applied. Yes.
It's already being applied. And I mean, this is horrifying. This whole thing, this social credit score, the SCS. Okay. Now, this is the mark of the beast. All right. I'm not going to mess around with it. I mean, when you see in Revelation, it says, he causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell save he had the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. Now, what is the number? What is the number? The number is going to be your social credit score. Your social credit score is his number. On my scale of 1 to 100, hey, guess what? You're a negative number. That's where I'd show up on the social credit score, right? We got a negative number for that guy, 7 digits. But when you look here, when you're talking about the number of the beast and the mark of the beast and the name of the beast, okay, what we're starting to see is, here it is. We're starting to see that this is arising, this SCS, the social credit score. Now, there's a video that I put down here. I put a language warning on it because it has a couple of quotes from people who just, shall we say, use some foul language. But the video itself is Paul Joseph Watson showing what happens in China right now. So let's talk about the social credit score. If you're caught jaywalking, boom, your social credit score goes down. If you're caught arguing in a public place, your social credit score goes down. If you fail to make a payment on time, your social credit score goes down. They can take your social credit score down for anything they consider to be antisocial behavior, with the goal, the stated goal, that when you get a certain social credit score that's low enough, you will not be able to move an inch out of your apartment. You won't be able to unlock the front gate with your card. You won't be able to buy gas for your car. You won't be able to buy gas at the store. You won't be able to enter the store. You won't be able to buy train tickets, plane tickets. You will not be able to leave. You will not be able to go anywhere. You won't be able to eat. Oh, I'm sorry, your social credit score is so low. Die. We've cut you off from everything. Die. Predicated upon some algorithm built by some AI somewhere. Go ahead.
Well, and I was going to say, I didn't know if you knew that the program and the software is actually being put out by Google, and they're under investigation right now in Congress because, of course, Congress is horrified that Google is doing this with China. But really, it brought to my mind the fact, just like social justice, it's what the left is trying to say. If you don't talk nice, if you have anything that's hate speech, I can totally see what you're saying. It's going to get to a point that you no longer are a good citizen. What you say.
Well, in their opinion.
In their opinion. Exactly.
Yeah, and in their opinion, anybody who believes in a creator is nuts. Anybody who accepts the premises of the Bible is nuts. Because in their mind, they've already proven that doesn't exist because they're headlong following their king. Their king. And I can tell you that this business of Google doing this stuff is absolutely outrageous. Okay, it's outrageous. And this social credit score, I mean, let's talk about where the social credit score is going to go. Okay, so Google knows, because all of its leadership will someday be facing tribunals like Nuremberg tribunals for the genocide they initiated. When we have this proposition of the demoralization of America, which is what we've had going on in this country, you see, this is what same-sex marriage is about. This is what transgender bathrooms are about. This is what the push to legalize pedophilia is about. It is about what? demoralizing the nation, destroying the concept of traditional marriage, destroying the concept of the traditional family, demonizing the father so that the father's never around, so that the state can take its place. And which state took its place? Was it the kind paternal state? No, it was the deep state that just wanted to take your child away from the father so that it could prepare the child for its future in the prison system that now has 8 million people in it, the largest prison system in the world. Okay? Let's talk about this idea of parents patriae under the state and what kind of a failure it is as the state has done unbridled war on the family. And now these same people for the last 50 years, 60 years, have been waging a nonstop campaign of demoralization to destroy the moral fiber of the people. That is to say, this is what we used to understand. This is what it means to be married as an American. This is what it means to grow up, to be a dad, to be a father, to be a husband. This is what it means to grow up, to be a mom, to be a mother, to be a wife. Oh no, that doesn't mean that anymore. You've come a long way, baby. Now your life can be smoking cigarettes and telling men to take a flying hike. While the state will take care of you with artificial currency and a program for your child to end up in prison. Boy, what's a wonderful future. And these same people now have created a social credit system without thinking about what the ramifications are. Because once a nation is completely demoralized, you know what follows that demoralization? Genocide. And once you impose a social credit score like this, what is going to follow? Genocide. You know, China in the last century killed almost 100 million people. Almost 100 million people. And that number is going to be broadly eclipsed by what this social credit score is going to bring about in China. And by the way, we know that the digital interface cannot tell the difference between truth and falsehood. You know, in the Soviet Union during the days of the Stalin purges, when Stalin was a brutal, vicious, random murderer, who said to kill a man is murder, to kill 1 million men is a statistic. He at one point wrote a letter to the mayor of Yekaterinburg and said, I need 6,000 more dead this month, kill them. He had the mayor in Minsk, Belarus, who pick 250 people randomly every Sunday, take them out in the woods and shoot them. Just for the sheer purposes of terrorizing the population under communism. Okay? Now, these same people, if you're living in that campaign, all it took was somebody writing a letter. So-and-so is a capitalist subversive. So-and-so thinks the United States is better than Russia. So-and-so hung out with somebody who saw Germany. That would be enough. Off to the gulag you go. Maybe you get there, maybe you don't. You know what some of those Soviet gulags, you know what they were? They would fill up a train load full of people who had been sentenced to the gulag. They would take the train out into Siberia, which between the Ural Mountains and Vladivostok is 7,000 miles of nothing. There's only 10 million people living there today, from the Urals to Vladivostok. They'd take them out into the middle of the wilderness. The train would stop. They'd say, everybody get off the train. This is your home. Bye. Train would leave. So you either built something or you died. That's simple. So on the basis of one letter. So what happens in the social credit score? I saw so-and-so do such and such. Boom. Social credit score goes down. You can't fly. You can't get on a train. You can't get on a bus. You can't buy food. You can't buy gasoline. You can't buy a car. You can't buy insurance. You can't pay your rent in your apartment. Get out.
Well, and you know what's so sad, Dr. Pidgeon, that as Americans, most Americans, they don't understand that concept. You know, my family is Cuban, and my grandfather was put in jail many times. He wrote for the New York Times because he knew who Castro was and Che Guevara, which nowadays, you know, everybody just wears a Che Guevara shirt. Nobody understands who the guy was, a horrible murderer. And, you know, my mom and my grandmother, they're like, oh my goodness, they're doing the same thing that they did in Cuba. all the time. Like they're doing
Only
the
it's
same
worse.
thing. Yes, worse here in the United States, and it's just getting progressively worse. And Americans don't see it; they don't recognize it because of the fact that they don't study history. People don't study history anymore, But
Yeah,
you could see it
including the
all day
people that don't.
long.
Yeah. Well, bendiciones para tu familia.
Oh, gracias. Muchas gracias.
De
Yes.
nada, de nada.
My
So,
grandfather was actually put in jail 5 times because he wrote for the New York Times, and he would tell them all the time, back in the 60s and the 50s, Castro's a bad guy, and
yeah.
nobody believed him. And
And
so,
he was a murderer himself, but you're right. Che Guevara was the more bloody of the two, and inhumane, and butchering people at the drop of a hat. And here, but the thing is, when you look back at history, you see in 1939 that there were people funding, i.e., the Bush family through the Union Bank of New York, who were funding the creation of Zyklon B, that was the gas that would be used in the gas chambers in Eastern Europe. Okay? Now, I don't know if they knew that they were going to be used for this ultimate genocide or not, but I'm going to put Google on notice right now as saying the software protocol that you wrote for a social credit system will be responsible for the death of hundreds of millions of people, and you will be blamed for it. Okay, next slide. Okay, now here's where we get into some stuff. When we start talking about the elements of 5G, we know, as I mentioned to you before, that some software protocols are being used by the police right now, and intelligence agencies are abusing your cell phone, right? They can download all your data. Once they have your cell phone, they can download your data, your GPS location, your photos, everything that you have on your phone. They can download it from anywhere in the country remotely because it's all hooked up on the same system. But now, and I don't know if you've ever heard of this MK Ultra program that came out of the CIA. There have been programs that have been used by the CIA, dark programs that have been used to create actors who were outside of human protocol. And they would do things involuntarily, what many people believe it to be involuntarily, where they would come out and shoot somebody or otherwise act in an extreme Luciferian manner. Some people say it's demonically possessed, but we're going to see here that electronic signals, okay, that use certain frequencies, the frequencies of delta, theta, alpha, beta, gamma, et cetera, that are consistent with the human body, these frequencies can be modulated to create mind control. Let's go to the next slide. Bearing in mind that 5G is going to put frequencies into your house on a continuous basis. So you see that mind control via mobile phone networks and mobile phones. You see the broadcast system here. This is an antiquated picture showing things like discs and large towers and maybe helicopters broadcasting signals. With the 5G system, you're going to be bombarded by a continuous stream of major information packets coming through your household daily. Into those packets comes things that will allow them to do motor control cortex at 10 hertz, auditory cortex at 15 hertz, visual cortex at 25 hertz, somatosensory cortex at 9 hertz, thought center at 20 hertz. And this does what? It gives information induced through modulation, motor irregular coordination, sound which bypasses the ears. That is to say, you're hearing voices in your head that are being broadcast. This image in the brain that bypass the eyes. You're seeing things that your eyes are not seeing. Phantom touch sense and imposed subconscious thoughts. Next slide.
now I have a question. Are we going to be able to opt out of this? Like, are all cell phones going to be on 5G? Like,
yeah, all cell phones will eventually be 5G. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. I mean, can you go back and buy an iPhone 4?
You can't even have a landline anymore. There's no way.
Yeah, right.
That the technology is obsolete. Yes.
Yeah, they're not putting a twisted pair of copper in your house, right? But now look at some of the things that this electromagnetic mind control, the current technology can do. Okay, current technology. Forced memory blanking, induced changes to hearing, sudden violent itching inside the eyelids, reading and broadcasting thoughts, controlled dreams, forced waking visions, microwave hearing, transparent eyelids, artificial tinnitus, forced movement of the jaw. I mean, you see these things that are happening here? Now, we've had some recent deaths that were kind of abnormal, during the last years of the Obama administration. Our friend, I forget their names now, all these people who died.
The Hillary Clinton clan?
Well, I mean, like, the Breitbart death where he suddenly
yes, absolutely, very strange.
The fellow of the Rolling Stone reporter who was in his Mercedes, and all of a sudden the car was out of his control and it was being remotely controlled and full speed right into a telephone pole. There's many things that are going on now that can be controlled by these psychoelectronic weapon effects, okay? And again, these are going to be much easier to deploy and to use in a system where you have a social credit score. This guy's got a low score. We're not interested in him anymore. Activate him using these things, and let's put together a protocol that causes him to do this, that, or the other thing, right? Okay, next slide. Okay, are you ready to enter into this now? Now that we've talked about this, yeah, let's get into the area of transhumanism, okay? It's an international intellectual movement that aims to transform the human condition by developing and making widely available sophisticated technologies to greatly enhance human intellect and physiology. Now, let me share this with you. This is going to become a critical problem for the average mom. Because, for instance, when you go to schools now in California, a mom who says, well, look, I'm a homeschooler, I believe in naturopathy, and I want to try to preserve my children in a naturopathic environment. No, your children will be vaccinated. Well, I'm going to homeschool. Oh, yeah, well, we made it illegal to homeschool and not have your children vaccinated. And they're never going to set foot in a California college without vaccines. They will be vaccinated. Okay, well, can you give me the peer-tested results from the Center of Disease Control, the CDC, or the FDA that has ever examined the human effects of vaccines on people? Oh, no, we can't, because the FDA never did them. The FDA never checked vaccines for efficacy against human beings. If the big pharma wants it, big pharma gets it. And in the meantime, you have this proliferation of these vaccines. Oh, vaccines do this and vaccines do that. Oh, yeah, sure they do. Sure they do. Like, for instance, you need to get your flu shot. And I'm not telling anybody, I'm not giving anybody any medical advice here. But how is it that the flu shot that they prepared in the vaccine is the one that they know is going to be the flu that's going to be here this year? How is it that they know that? I mean, it's just a question. President Trump said they're bogus. Okay, Trump said the flu shot is bogus, right? And his family has had personal experience with the effects of autism rising from tainted vaccines. All of the peer review articles on that subject have been repressed by big pharma. They don't want to allow it out there, okay? But as the homeschool mom says, I don't want my kids being vaccinated. What are you going to do when they tell you your child cannot enter into this school without being chipped to enhance his or her intellectual performance consistent with the rest of the class?
100%. How about CPS? It's going to be called, arrests.
You're not chipping your child. We're going to have to take your children away from you and chip them behind your back, right?
That's
and
right.
What chip are we going to give them? We're going to give them this chip here that will, of course, be wireless, operating on 5 gig or better. Mm-hmm. So your child's brain is being inundated with carcinogen-forming waves coming into the brain. And is the brain actually picking up additional instruction? More importantly, the chip provides for the intake of information. It does not provide for the intaking of truth, or for that matter, meaning, and most assuredly, not life. Okay, next slide. So we have three choices. We have the cyborg, represented by RoboCop, who is famous for saying, "You have 45 seconds to comply." And if you recall, that particular robot malfunctioned and gunned down the second in command in the city. But here you have a cyborg. That is to say, mostly robot, but part human. there's some aspect of the human psyche, some aspect of the human body remaining, okay? Then, of course, our middle, GAIA, which is generally a general artificial intelligence applied that is strictly machines. That is to say, the machines become our masters. Unbridled, untethered, unfettered control that is given because we give them this technology that allows them to compute at a speed 1,000 trillion times faster than a human being. And so even if you put your cyber chip into your brain like the cyborg does, you will still not be able to compete with the ultimate AG, with the ultimate GAIA. You will not be able to do it. Or do we retain our humanity? And thank you, Robert Palmer, for loaning me your picture. Will we be able to retain our humanity? Okay, these are the choices. Let's go to the next slide here. We're going to go through a couple of ideas here is to give you an idea of where transhumanism is right now, okay? This is a 2016 article from Short Sharp Science, $100 million project to make intelligent boosting brain implant. Next slide. Is the US Navy planning to implant people with microchips? Oh, thanks. Oh, you joined the Navy? Mandatory implants. You joined the Navy, mandatory implants. Well, wait a minute. I didn't want to do that. Too bad. You're in the Navy. You don't have a say in what's going to happen here. We're just going to do it. Okay? Next slide. Humans with amplified intelligence could be more powerful than AI. Yeah, that's speculating. That's speculating. Now, one way that humans with amplified intelligence could be more powerful is because human beings can distinguish the truth and can distinguish meaning. But I can tell you, once that chip is in that brain, you can already see what the microwaves are capable of doing. Maintaining independent thought is going to be almost impossible, if not 100% impossible. Next slide. Brain implants give people perfect memories and night vision. In other words, you put this brain implant in, and what takes place is your memories become perfected. That is, from the very day you were born, you begin to remember 100% of your life. And it creates night vision. Now, I was talking with a gal at the Legends conference. I said, okay, look, would you buy this device? If I give you a pair of glasses, you put the glasses on. There are speakers in these little earpieces that go behind your ears that give you perfect quality sound in the ears, even if you have a hearing problem. Your lenses are not lenses at all that you see through, but are actually screens that are giving you feedback this way and are projecting your eyes that way. But those screens are capable of giving you 100% perfect night vision. And when somebody asks you a question, they're immediately interfaced on the 5G network to give you 20 gigabyte speed to answer the question. What's 2 plus 2? Your lens automatically gives you 4. What's the quadratic equation? It automatically is written on your lens and you give it to it. If a person is talking to you in a foreign language, it's automatically translating it in your eyes so that you can hear and read what they're saying. And when you speak back to them, it gives it back to them in their language. What would you pay for a device like this? And more importantly, would you put it on? Because at this point, you are becoming the cyborg. You know, when we were at the conference, this professor was saying, how many people want to be a human? How many people want to be a cyborg? And how many people want to let AI go on? So everybody was totally opposed to GAIA running the world because this was a quote unquote Christian conference. Well, how many people want to be cyborgs? Well, none of us. We all just want to be natural human beings. 80% of them at the time of the question was asked were on their smartphone doing something. Now, it wasn't connected. It wasn't surgically implanted, but it was all but surgically implanted. They've already voted with their feet.
And you brought up the point that I was going to make. We're already cyborgs. You know, Google makes me very intelligent. There's a word that I don't know. I go in, I look for it. My son, even, you know, it's just very, very hard. You know, we're very diligent about not letting the kids be, you know, they have to know how to use a computer, but they can look up whatever. I mean, it's already there. Absolutely. And in fact, I had this conversation with my now 17-year-old which he knows the difference. But imagine he was like, yeah, my friends would be the first ones to say, yeah, let me implant that in my brain. You know, it would help people in jobs. Well, actually, what company is not going to have an implant? I don't have to train you. The information is already there.
In fact, we're going to specify what implant you have to have when you take the job at our company. You'll have to have this implant, right?
Yes.
All the preformed information and blah, blah, blah.
So right there's the money exchange between the company that's providing the plug, the implant. Wow. Okay, I'll let you finish.
Yeah, you see. Okay, let's move on to the next slide here. Okay, brain implants that augment the human brain using AI. Okay, so here we go. Now they're talking about the brain implants that are coming. And of course, there's going to be multiple brain implants. And the problem for the average person, the problem for the average believer is, can I live my life without the brain implant? That's a question. Because that brain implant is the chip that will be in your forehead, the number that will be in your hand. That's it. You see, you will have taken the mark of the beast. So one question you have to ask yourself is this: do you believe that Mashiach's return is imminent? Do you believe that? Now, I do believe that. As it was in the time of Noah, so it shall be in the time of the coming of the Son of Man. We are here at this point. And we're at a point where you're seeing that these dark forces of the fallen watchers, and if you recall the book of Enoch or Hanok, tells us that these watchers taught this technology. There are many people who believe that the technology that was developed by Nazi Germany in World War II was watcher-given technology, and that we were given watcher technology after World War II, or possibly during the war, given us the technology for nuclear weapons, the technology for certain lighter than air formulas, or the use of titanium, for instance, instead of aluminum, and so on and so forth. There were a number of things that were given, that technology that we use, that many people believe were given by fallen watchers. And so when you see this, the question is this looks like, oh, gee, we could be, sucking in all this information, and we could just be brilliant people and blah, 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 blah. At the end of the day, you have a bunch of information that means what? Where does it take you? I mean, if you have all this information stored in your brain, okay, I got 1 billion tons of information in my brain, and I'm going to add another 20 trillion bytes of information next year with this new upgrade that I'm going to get, and blah, 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 blah. Okay, does it help you enjoy food when you sit down to the dinner table? Does it help you in terms of your relationship with the people you love and even the people you don't love? Does it help you in terms of how you live your life? Are you going to sleep different? Are you going to wake differently? Are you going to walk differently? Well, you may. But ultimately, all of those applications are going to be used for purposes of killing other human beings. The interface of life is something entirely different. Okay, let's go on to the next slide. Nanobrain implant. Again, this is ancient technology. Okay, this technology is about 10 years old now. They're well beyond this. But look at this. The future is here. A call to update mental health diagnosing, right? And so the idea here is that by going into these nanobrain implant technologies, somehow we're going to be able to give the mind more to think about. But like I say, nanotechnology is 7 tiers beyond what's currently being explored. Behind currently what's being explored. Okay, next slide. Okay, so I want to spend a little bit of time on this slide. Yahshua answered, you say that I am a king, but it was for this end that I was born, and for this cause that I came into the world, that I should bear witness unto the truth. Everyone that is of the truth hears my voice. And Pilate said unto him, and what is truth? Okay, this is from the Gospel of John, Yehukanan, chapter 18, verses 37 through 38. What is truth? What is the way? What is life? Now, I've asked this question to many people in many different languages, right? What is life? And when you look at this question of what is life, we have to see what is given here. What is truth? Now, take out a piece of paper and a pencil, and draw for me, if you will, the essence of life. What shape is it? What color is it? It has no color. It has no shape. Take your pencil and draw for me the essence of truth. What's it look like? What color is it? What shape is it? What form is it? It has no form. It has no shape. What about meaning? If I say, give me the meaning of this word, draw for me the essence of meaning. It has no shape. It has no color because it has no physical reality. So what did we just conclude? Life, truth, and meaning have no physical reality. Is there something more important than life? If you want to argue that, no fair being alive doing it. Is there something more important than truth? Is there something more important than meaning? This was called Einstein's conundrum, because Einstein talked about energy being equal to mass times a constant squared, right? So you had this idea of energy and matter, but what you didn't have was consciousness. I think, therefore I am. Do you believe there is a creator who speaks and a creator who hears? Scripture tells us not only does he hear and speak and taste and touch, but he also smells. Right? Make this fine odor here in this sacrifice. Burn this incense that I might smell its odor. Right? So you have a creator who has all of the sensory perception and has all of the cognitive function, who speaks and who hears, and of course who understands dimensions much, much beyond anything that we understand or cognize. And he says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man comes unto the Father but by me. That's in Gospel of John, chapter 18, verse 6. So when we see this, what is the way? Well, Psalm 119, verse 1 tells us the Torah is the way. Psalm 119, verse 143 tells us that the Torah is the truth, right? And so what you see is the Torah is embodied in Mashiach, in the Messiah. It's embodied in the Messiah. He clarifies the Torah. He fulfills the Torah. He brings the Torah to us in its final form. And what we see is that when we talk about truth, truth is established by the testimony of two witnesses telling the truth, not bearing false witness, but who tell the truth. Now, there are things that tell the truth whether you want them to or not. For instance, if you get in a car wreck, the fact that you got a bunch of dented in stuff on your car tells the truth about whether or not you've been in a car wreck. There are things that tell the truth. And when you have two or more of those things telling you something, you can establish the truth. And it's so important for the young person now to understand you have to be able to decipher what is true, because I can tell you in this AI world that we're coming to right now, the same people who developed that software for China, that social credit score software, are the same people who are editing and censoring what you see on YouTube, what you see on Facebook, what you see in the social networking, what you see on Twitter, what you see on Instagram. It's being edited so that you get one form of information and not critical thinking or dissenting opinion from that information, which is so important for you to decipher in order to tell that which exactly is. Okay?
And you know what came to my mind also, Dr. Pidgeon? The fact that so many people really don't know who Messiah is, who their Messiah is. They don't, you know, if he's not wearing, what came to my mind, you better know he wears seats, because there may be somebody else. Really, this understanding this technology, I can understand how they can come up with a false Messiah that very well looks like Jesus, very well looks like Yahshua. You better know him. You better know him. And this is, wow, it's the voice, his voice. How intimate is that? You better know him.
You better know the sound of his voice, because there will be other voices competing for that spot.
Wow.
And there, and and the thing is that it's not only that, but this is one of the big issues here. We have a choice to make now. And of course, when we talk about the called out assembly, the calling out of the assembly, of course, begins with Shabbat, because this is the seal on his people, or those who are keeping the Shabbat. That's the seal on his people. Very important. Okay. Now, in addition to that, it's those who have the testimony of Mashiach and who keep his commandments. If you recall in Matthew 28, he says, all power on heaven and earth has been given unto me. Therefore, go and baptize every nation in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, which, by the way, is one name, which you can read in my blog that's coming out in 2 days. Baptizing in the name of the Father, the Son, and Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey all that I have commanded. There is a walk. I like to say, just say natural. There is a walk that is so beautiful, so wonderful, that is given to us in the flesh. Here we are, human beings. We're born with 2 legs, 2 arms, and a head, and whatever. And given that our flesh is born in this circumstance, we are born to walk a life of prosperousness, a life of abundance, a life in a world that is full of beautiful things. So when we talk about abundance, I'm not talking about amassing a bunch of junk that you pick up at Walmart into a storage shed that you're never going to see, right? But we talk about freedom. We talk about the idea of, look, see the Grand Canyon, walk through the Canadian Rockies, see the beaches that have been created. Look at the sunset. Listen to the sound of the waterfall. Enjoy fresh, pure, clean water. Take of the food of the earth that is given to you without the GMO, without the pesticides, without the herbicides, without all of that other stuff, but just the cleanness of his creation, the way he gave it to you. And keep your body clean for the cleanness of his creation. Do what they call the clean things and live a natural life. It said in the 10 Commandments, I give these 10 Commandments to you as a covenant. Do them and live in them. Now, when you think about those 10 Commandments independently, you think about what's called the Decalogue. Look at Deuteronomy 5. When you think about those commandments that are given to you in Deuteronomy 5, I want you to think about in your mind as you're evaluating those, if I do that, will I live longer than if I don't? Will I live longer than if I don't? And you will discover very quickly, it's as simple as this. Absolutely you will. Back when I was a kid growing up, it said, thou shalt not steal. If you broke onto your neighbor's property and tried to steal some of his watermelons, you were lucky if you didn't get a shotgun blast in the backside. Yeah, so you'd live longer when you don't steal. You live a lot longer when you don't murder. I mean, those 10 commandments are very clear. You will live in these. And when we talk about living in these compared to this artificial contrivance that a bunch of software gurus who have no loyalty to anything whatsoever are going to create, that ultimately is going to result in the deaths of millions and millions and millions of people. They think they're creating a technology that will cause people to live forever. And what they don't know is, look, you can't put the soul onto a microchip. Ray Kurzweil thinks you can. Well, if I take all of my memories and all of my thoughts and I put it over here in this microchip, then that could be placed into a cyborg or into another human being, and then I will live in that human being. No, you won't. No, you won't. Your memories will, but you won't. It'll be like, yeah, you've got great videos, and those videos have all been memorized by that guy. That ain't you. Your soul has one existence. You'll be here, and then you will be before the throne. A man is appointed to die once and then to face judgment. Doesn't make any difference what you think about how you can transfer your memories and your ideas and your conceptualization into a machine. What they don't know is they're creating machines that have this capability that can be occupied by the souls of the Nephilim and the Elohim and the Raphaim, the Eliud and the Raphaim, those demons will be capable of possessing those machines. Very capable. Now, that's something that they don't want to talk about. They've never even considered it because they don't read that stuff and they don't believe in any of it. They just believe in their secular, myopic worldview that somehow man is going to build a Tower of Babel that's going to allow them to invade the provinces of heaven when they get to the top floor.
Yep, pretty much. Now, I'm going to pick your brain, so I hope you're ready now.
Okay.
Now, because having this understanding, and yes, absolutely, I 100% agree with. Not only is this what you've presented, John 18:6, a spiritual, it's also a physical, what to do. You know, what would you say if you had a family and you were a young family and you had, you know, teenagers that you're preparing to enter the world now? What would you say to them would be a priority for preparing the next generation, knowing this information?
Okay, well,
practical.
Okay, the first practical application is shut off your GPS when you're driving and learn to go where you're supposed to go. I don't use GPS. When I drive downtown Seattle, I drive down there because I know where I'm going. My kids who use GPS can't find their way to a place that they've been to a dozen times without the GPS directing them. So first premise is shut off the GPS and learn where you're going. Try to memorize roads, figure out where you are, look out at the sky and try to be able to determine which way is north, which way is south, which way is east and west. You have to learn some of these basic parameters first in the event that you're dropped off somewhere you have to walk. And remember, if you have to walk, find a river and follow it downstream. It will eventually take you somewhere. It will eventually take you somewhere, okay? But when you're talking about survival skills, there's basic fundamentals that you have to know. Learning, of course, the rudiments of farming is a big deal. You know, even if you're just a gentleman farmer who's providing for your own family, you need to learn those kinds of skills. But more importantly, you need to be able to learn independence of thought. Just because everybody else believes something doesn't mean it's true. Decide for yourself. My dad used to tell me, believe nothing of what you hear and half of what you see. In other words, use the critical mind to evaluate everything in front of you. Critical thought. If you don't have the skill, learn the skill. Take the time to learn it. You're going to need it to survive, okay? Now, when we talk about the upcoming generations, consider what you want to do in your life. Is it your inborn desire, if you're a boy, to be a husband and a father? Maybe it isn't. Maybe you just want to be a jack of all trades and travel the world and do whatever. Okay, that's fine. But be true to yourself. You know, one of the biggest decisions I ever made was when I was 18 years old. And I was, you know, lying in a bed in an apartment that was about 95 degrees with no air conditioning. And I was mulling over the world. I had just finished reading War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy. And I'm mulling over the world, and it occurred to me, look, I am going to accept the truth no matter what. No matter what. And it's a difficult decision because there are people who say, I don't want to know the truth. I want to know the truth is a relative thing, that I can make my own truth and construct it as I see fit as I go along. There's a lot to be said for constructing and building your own life, but I can tell you that if you love the truth, then you will seek the truth. And if you seek the truth, then you will seek and find Yah. Because you will seek him and you will find him when you seek him with all of your heart. And I can tell you that the farther you get into seeking truth, the farther you get into seeking the true meaning of life, the farther you get into seeking the truth about metaphysical reality, which is a question that will come to you. You may say to yourself, that stuff is a bunch of nonsense for old fogies. It will come to you. It might come to you when you're sitting in the maternity ward and you're giving birth to your first child. There might be a lot of questions going through your mind. Or it might come to you when you lose a loved one who dies for no apparent reason at an inappropriate age, and you're sitting there at their deathbed saying, what happened? And how do I make sense of this? There is a metaphysical question that's going to come to you at some point in your awakening. And when it does, if you seek the truth, you will find him, because he is the truth.
That's very powerful, Dr. Pidgeon, because as long as we seek the truth with all of our hearts, and we are, no matter what happens to us, we will be in his will, because he is the truth.
That's right.
So that will, go ahead.
Yeah, and he will carry us. I mean, the thing is, when you talk about this idea of deliverance, look, this is ultimately going to come to a confrontation. Okay, there's no possible way this is not going to come to a confrontation, because one of two things will happen. Either this AI world, this Gaia world, will rise untethered, unfettered, and it will rise, in which case, and believe me, the technology right now is so far beyond Terminator 1 and Terminator 2. It's so far beyond. That stuff is just antique junk compared to what they're building now. Wow. There will be cyborgs. I mean, you can go and you can see the videos right now of cyborgs doing backflips off tables and landing. Bipedal cyborgs running through the forest with no problem. And as this technology increases, and we're talking about, and you're talking earlier about 20 years from now. This isn't 20 years from now. By 2020, you're going to see so much information on the table, and you're going to see the computing speed advance so fast and so far beyond human computing capability. I mean, let me give you an example. Suppose you say, okay, I need to make sure that my daughter can compete in daycare. So you have a chip installed in your daughter when she's 3 years old over at daycare, because that's what all the other girls are doing. Your daughter comes home and 3 weeks later can speak 165 languages. How interested is she, in your opinion, about what goes on in life?
Right. No, that would be, you would be obsolete as a parent. That's it. There's just no. Yeah.
You're immediately obsolete. You're just a part of the dustbin of history. Mm-hmm. Right?
Fifth commandment, gone.
Just like that. Okay. And so that's a decision that parents have to weigh. But when you see that that's what's facing us now, there's going to be one group of people who are going to say, we simply are not going to tolerate this. This is I forget his name was, Terminator John, who decided to fight back.
Right.
And they fought back against the machine, right? You talk about raging against the machine. This would be raging against the machine. Ultimately, one of three things is going to happen. One of four things is going to happen. Either one, there's no war, and Gaia just controls the roost and eventually exterminates every human being on the planet in favor of its superior intelligence. Yeah. And of course, it will only last for maybe a generation or two, because there's nobody there to do the maintenance, and then boom, it all comes to a complete end. And what we've had is total death of humanity and total death of everything else on the planet. That's one thing. The second thing is that Gaia is not allowed to rise unobstructed, and you have a protracted war that takes place between human beings and Gaia, and there will be a great deal of genocide that goes on in between there for those who have become cyborgs. The cyborgs are going to be hated by both sides. So you're going to have a very interesting proposition that takes place there. The third thing that could happen is mankind says, we've had enough of this, and terminates all the companies that are taking us to this point right now. Now, the chances of that happen are exactly zero, because I would venture to say that 90% of your audience right now has a smartphone. And people have already voted with their wallet what they think about this increase in cyber capability. I'm one of them. I'm sitting here talking to my computer, for heaven's sakes. So here we go. So now you say to yourself, all right, so that's already happened. So what are the chances of people rising up and saying no AI? The chances are, in my opinion, zero. And the reason being is because if we don't develop AI technology that will create defense machinery that is more advanced than anybody else in the world. Russia will beat us to it. China will beat us to it. And then we will be slaves to their AI instead of them being slaves to our AI. So that third option is virtually zero. Now, the fourth option is the option that I believe is going to happen, which is you're going to see AI rise. You're going to see the apostasy begin, which is where people are going to say all that stuff that's written in the Bible is a bunch of antiquated nonsense that belonged to an era that was before all this great stuff that's coming in with artificial intelligence and these Gaia machines that are just so super cool. We already see fire being called down from heaven. Signs and wonders are taking place that are consistent with Revelation 13. All of this stuff is already in place, and people are going to be falling away from the faith in droves in terms of accepting this chip that somehow is going to give them the intelligence they didn't have before, that is not going to help them eat food, get more sleep, or improve their relationships between other human beings one iota, not one little bit. Nor, they kept telling me, oh, we're going to invent this digital world. Yeah, I'm a pre-digital guy. I'm a guy who grew up in the analog era. When the digital world came in, I'm going, okay, what is this? The digital world, right? They kept telling us, oh, look, CDs, they produce music that has no signal-to-noise ratio whatsoever. It's so good. Now what? Albums are coming back because the CD is completely sterile. It has no human soul in it that the old analogs did. But what you're going to see is this rise of the digital world is going to continue to move forward and forward and forward. And as it does, the apostasy will increase. And as the apostasy increases, the falling away will increase. And the deception will increase such that even the elect might be deceived. And right at the point when Gaia is under the impression we have arrived at a singularity, we have arrived at a singular religion, which exalts the premises of the Emerald Tablets and the doctrines of Luciferianism that have been practiced since the beginning of Babylon. And here we are. We're ready to move ahead with this new world order in a singular movement, unified throughout the world. And anybody who disagrees has a social credit score of 0 or below and has no chance of surviving. It is at this point that the Messiah arrives and says, I am the Lion of the tribe of Judah.
I agree.
And now it is over.
Wow. And we're not that far away from that. We think that we are, but we really are not, because a lot of people are not tracking this, which is why I was so passionate about doing this. It is difficult information, but it's also in a way hopeful, because what you think is another 50 years, 20 years, really, it's really not that far away, those scenarios that you just described. Now, I'm going to tell you, being part of a ministry, as like Now You See TV, where it has grown exponentially in the last 2 years since I've been around, where there is so many people hungry, Dr. Pidgeon, hungry for truth. You also see the falling away, but you also see so many people waking up to the Torah and the way. What I see the way, it brings to my mind the scripture Jeremiah 6:12, I think, where it says that we will have a crossroad where we're going to be called to return to the ancient ways. And you'll have that crossroad, but there'll be people that will say, I don't want to take that crossroad. I don't want to go down that road. And so with all of that said, what do you think of people like the Lucases that are, I'm a city girl. I never knew what hunting was. I thought people that own guns from Miami, Florida, the people that own guns were criminals. Until I was blessed with what we call my Noah, which is my husband, military mindset. And he's just, passionate about preparing his children and myself. What you're describing, get off the GPS, learn practical skills, as long as we maintain ourselves in the will of the Father and we do our due diligence to go back to the ancient ways, like Jeremiah tells us, we're going to see manna fall from the sky. We're going to see another Exodus. And so, what do you think about that route, about that mindset?
Yeah, it's very important. Very important. You know, one of the people in our group, she grew up in the city her whole life, and now she is living in a rural setting. And they were raising cattle, you know, and we had a big dispute about, you know, clean and unclean foods, and whether or not the Messiah, whether or not that Yah had ever determined for us to eat meat. And I was saying, well, look, yeah, there's premises here that come out of Noah that indicate that he said, yeah, take seven couples of clean food and only 2 couples of unclean, because of course he was showing him what clean food was, right? And so we got a big debate, big heated debate. Then she had to slaughter one of her own cows that she had raised, right? They took it to the slaughterhouse and filled up their freezer with meat. And once she filled up that refrigerator, that freezer with the meat of that cow that they had raised, she had a completely different concept about meat. And it's the same thing with hunting. You know, when you're a hunter and you have to, you know, gut the animal that you've killed, you end up with a completely different idea about the life that's been provided on this earth for mankind to consume. When you're growing your own food in your garden, you know, I mean, I couldn't stand Brussels sprouts as a kid. But once I grew that first stalk of Brussels sprouts and I saw them grow on that stalk, I was so impressed I couldn't wait to eat them. You know what I mean? So there is a lot to be said for all of that, and the simple rhythm of life that is denoted in the feast. You know, this idea of spring feast, which is really the barley harvest, and then Shavuot, which is really the wheat harvest, and then of course when you get to Tabernacles, you have the grape harvest and the later harvest, right? And those 3 harvest times are an important flow of rhythm in life. And the idea of the Shabbat in terms of practicing that rhythm, and the agricultural rules that are found in Torah, all of those rhythms are given to you to give you a rhythm of life, a consistent rhythm of life. Not to beat each other up and say, this is the rhythm, you either practice it or I'm going to hit you in the head with a hammer. No, it is the idea that you are to be, you know, independently motivated to follow the rhythm of life. And he gives us that rhythm that we might live in it. And so when you're talking about getting out of the city, whatever you do, I mean, look, I believe that you need to prepare the heart, soul, and mind. You need to prepare the heart, soul, and mind. Before you prepare anything else, you have to prepare the heart, soul, and mind. And that means, you know, this idea of confessing the Creator, and not just confessing the Creator, but it is the knowledge of the Father and the Son whom he sent, which brings eternal life. And it is the knowledge of the name that brings the love of the Father into your soul. It is the knowledge of the name. You know, the breathing of the name into the soul is what created your life. The speaking of the name in return is what unifies you with the Father. That is what brings the unity, you see? And so the idea is that you need to, the young people need to understand that if they intend to have a life that is outside this ridiculous Gaia stuff, and there is a beautiful, wonderful, magnificent life outside the Gaia stuff. And if you want to have that life, you know, you need to take the time to learn the name of the Father and his Son. What is his name and his Son's name, if you can tell? Proverbs 30, verse 4. Proverbs 30, verse 4. Mashiach says in John 17, verse 26, I have declared your name unto them, and I will declare it, that the love of you that is in me might be in them, and I in them. Important issue. So, learn the name, declare the name, understand that, learn his way. When people say, we know the truth. Okay, what is the way? You get out of bed, you're going to put a foot down. You're going to walk away. You're either going to walk north, south, east, or west. So you might put a foot down and go back to bed. You might put a foot down, go straight ahead, walk into a wall. You might make a right, go out one door, might make a left, go out the other. One way is correct. Every other way is not. Mashiach told you, I am the way. What is that way? There is a rhythm to life. There is a path. There is a narrow path, a narrow gate few find it, but there is a narrow path that to walk. Find that narrow path. Be one of those who walks that narrow path. With these things, we begin to see now that the other stuff is going to fall in place, even if you're in the city, right? Even if you're in the city, these other things are going to fall in place. And be open to what the Ruach HaKodesh is going to do. So if the Ruach breathes a certain wind on you and says, you must go from here to there, then go. But if he says stay, then stay. You know, I made the statement, you know, we could have left a long time ago. We live in the city. We live in one of the most decadent cities in the entire country, in the Seattle area. And I made the decision to stay here and not to go. Of course, it wasn't my decision. It was the Ruach's decision. But it premised upon the idea that he wants me to serve here. Now that may not always be the case, but that's what the case is today. And so when it comes to what your husband is doing, your husband is on the right track. He has skills that were given to him, training as a military man. And those skills need to be imparted to the children, because the children, you know, when this thing comes to a grinding halt, there will not be food in the stores after 24 hours. The GPS will fail, the cars will fail, everything else will fail. Now what?
Well, and I also believe, Dr. Pidgeon, that the Ruach will tell you, okay, it's time, you know, move. And, you know, for us, we are hopefully, which I know people might think we're crazy, but the Father has told us, build it and they will come. You know, our heart's desire is to acquire some land and just start doing what we can now. And when the time does come, you know, I know that there will be provision for anybody that wants to come. And so, and there's a lot of people doing the same thing that have contacted me that are doing the exact same thing. So when you say, wait on the Ruach is telling people it's time. So you're definitely on the right track with this teaching, because it is now. It's actually, you have opened my eyes to the fact that I didn't expect for it to be so far along, especially with the 5G. The 5G.
Oh yeah, it's so far. I mentioned to you before the show started.
Yeah.
It's much farther along than what you can imagine.
Yeah.
Much farther along. And when you take, you know, when you realize that you had this talking head, Sophia, they called her, wisdom.
Yes.
Who was given citizenship in Saudi Arabia,
yeah.
Right? And then you see cyborgs doing backflips, you know, picking up cars with their hands, being covered in self-healing flesh, running through the woods, bipedal, running through, you know, very difficult terrain as bipedal. And then you see also these bots that are being made that are so human-like. They're being put in brothels. When you take these, you take those three technologies and merge them, in just a few years, it will be possible for you to spend $100,000, you know, on a 10-year financing plan that allows you to get your own cyberbot, bring GAIA home yourself, and you have somebody who can, you know, cook, paint the house, fix everything in the house, speak every language, do all the ordering, walk out onto the freeway and tow your car with their bare hand, fix the car 100% of the way, right? And adjust all of your technology, blah, 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 blah. This is just rudimentary single servant robot. And then with the next upgrade, the robot's looking at you like, why am I helping you again?
This is like sci-fi stuff. They've been telling us from day one what they were going to do. Like, seriously, what you're describing is like what you see in movies and, you know, in series that we've been watching for years and years and years, and it's finally here.
It's finally here, and they're developing it very, very quickly now. All three of those areas are being developed because you have, of course, defense industries developing the cyborgs to be used in warfare. You have the sex industry developing these, you know, these robots for brothels. And then, of course, you have the intelligence IT community developing the intelligence for purposes of transferring their souls into the IT. You know, I hate to break it to Ray Kurzweil. But here he's going to transfer all of his intellect and all of his intelligence, memories, and everything else into a cyborg. And then you get, you know, the crash of Microsoft 25 Windows crashes, boom, they lose it all. Now what?
Wow. We have to maintain focus on our blessed hope, which is Yahshua, because I mean, it really is hard and difficult to wrap your head around it all, you know?
Well, yeah, but just keep this in mind, and I want to say this to the young people who are watching this. Just keep this in mind.
Yes, please.
The popular culture is telling you a lie. Everything about the pop culture is a lie. All of the leadership in the pop culture, particularly for young people, have openly confessed Satan. They'll tell you to your face. I mean, if you're talking about Katy Perry or Ariana Grande or whoever it is you're talking about, they have openly confessed Satan. The average movie star will stand around with doing the 666 number, covering one eye in obeisance to the Illuminati. Most of the leadership down there are self-confessed Satanists and Luciferian worshipers. The government leadership are people who drink the blood of children and who engage in human sacrifice. The pop culture and the mainstream culture that is given to you over a digital device is a lie. And if you want to enjoy life and live life, instead of listening to some downloaded piece of music, go to a live concert. Instead of looking at the picture of some painting, go to the museum. Instead of studying the photos of Rome, make plans to be standing on the Tiber yourself. Instead of doing these artificial things that are given to you by a cell phone that can't tell the difference between what is real and what is a digital binary code, go do it yourself. Instead of saying, I'm going to have a relationship with my family member over Skype, go and visit. Instead, I've seen young people who are standing next to each other, texting each other, because they don't know how to talk to one another. And absolutely unheard of to drop in unannounced and say, hey, can I have a cup of tea? Unheard of. But guess what? This is what life used to be.
Now, I know that our show is running a little long, but I want to ask you one last question, which is a difficult one, but really in my heart, after, you know, we're coming on to Hanukkah and understanding what the Maccabees had to endure and what they went through. As a mom myself, you know, being a pre-trib baby, grew up in, you know, Pentecostal Baptist till 2012. And I was like, I'm on that first bus, not going through any of those issues. So with all of that said, and understanding that Hanukkah is coming, do you believe that we will we will probably have persecution, and we have to, I believe, prepare our minds for that, and our children too.
Yeah, there's no question that persecution is coming. I mean,
right?
No, absolutely no question. And this is a difficult subject. You know, if you're in the third world, if you're in like a Muslim country and you convert to this faith, you count the cost up front. People who convert to the faith in those countries realize they can be killed, dismembered, and everything else for their faith. And they convert anyway because they know the truth, because they know the truth. This is a very big deal when you're talking about, you know, whether you're talking about in Egypt or you're talking Afghanistan or Pakistan or some of these places where people, or Iran, Iraq, where people come out and they convert to this faith because the Messiah has visited them in a dream, or because of the urging of the Holy Spirit that has called to them and they have listened. So persecution is coming, but so is deliverance. So is deliverance. And all those who call upon the name of Yah will be delivered. All of those who call upon the name of Yah will be delivered. He will spread his wings over his people. And there is a coming second Exodus that he will cover. Now, there are some people who aren't going to make the second Exodus. There are some people who will be martyred for the faith. There will be some people who are persecuted to death. But the gospel says, do not worry about it if you're persecuted. When you get up in front of the judge, don't even worry about what you're going to say. The Holy Spirit will give you every word you need to speak. Now, the question is, can you live a life without fear? And the answer is, yes, you can. You can live without fear if you understand in whose kingdom you have citizenship. And if your citizenship is certain in that kingdom, there is no one on this planet that can take it away from you.
Beautiful. And I think we should end right there. That is our hope, because at the end of the day, we can only do our best, and we know that the Father, Abba's got it. And I can't wait to see, because we're us as a family, we're starting, Dr. Pidgeon, to live like the book of Acts, end time stuff, like only things that is being orchestrated behind closed doors that we could have never imagined. And so those times are coming, and it's exciting. And I am just so, honored to be alive now. This is the chosen generation.
Well, amen, amen. Now, let me just say this to some of the young people that are listening. Okay?
Yes, please.
Okay. Now is the time, people say, well, look, I've got a magic formula at church, give an altar call, and then here you go. And then all of a sudden you have salvation. Well, it's much more difficult than that. But I'm going to say this to you, is that when we seek, when you turn to seek and you say, look, I want to know the truth of this matter, and I want to know that I have sanctity of soul, that I am of the sacred and not of the profane, okay? There is a path that can be walked. There is a path that can be found. It's a narrow path. It's a difficult path. There's a wall of fire on one side and a deep ocean on the other. But if it's in your heart to follow that path, and you say, I am not afraid of the truth, I can stand for the truth, I seek the truth, I love the truth, by loving the truth, you will not be deceived. And if you're seeking the truth, then do so. Follow him who is the truth. He said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father but by me. Follow him who is the truth. He will carry you in the times of darkness, in the times of despair, in the times when you don't think you can get up. And he understands the falling downs that you've already had. Oh, I committed this sin, I can't talk about it. Yes, you can. He knows every sin, and he's offered salvation to some of the worst murderers who ever lived. He came to them with a petition of salvation. There is nothing that you have done that is outside the scope of his forgiveness and mercy. For it is written, Ki tov ki la'olam chesed, for he is good and his mercy endures forever. Be of that calling. Be of that calling. Be of that walk. Yeah, and I can tell you, he loves you. He loves you from the beginning of time, before you were formed in your mother's womb. He loved you. He knows your name. He carries every tear in the palm of his hand. And he's waiting for you. You are his child. He's waiting for you. Call to him. Abba, Abba, I am here. Hear my voice. Call to him. Call to him and see. Okay. So I'm going to leave you with one small prayer, if I can. Heavenly Father, we give this hour to you. We give this video to you. Hear our prayers. Be blessed in our words and in our walk. Cover us with your wings. Take this time now to bring your hand around us, to gently gather your sheep into your sheepfold. We claim you. We are your children. You are our Elohim. Be with us in all things, in spirit and in truth. In the name of our beloved, blessed Messiah, by whose shed blood we are redeemed on this earth. Amen.
Amen, Dr. Pidgeon. Thank you so much. That was so powerful. And I'm sure there'll be lots of questions. I know this is pre-recorded, but we might have to do a part 2. I'm sure there'll be questions, and there'll be more things that we can talk about. And I'm just so thankful that you made the time to come on our show and talk about this. And you did a great job. And thank you so much.
Well, thank you. I'll see you again soon.
Yes. And with all of that said, I say shalom.
Okay, shalom.